digitaljamsessions.com. Hello and welcome to this Digital Jam session. Today we are joined once again by Amalia, who joins us once again, and we also have Norman with us as well. But I'm going to ask you to first of all introduce yourselves and then explain the connection for our lovely listeners.
Sure.
So,
I'm Amelia Coleman. I am an author and a speaker and now a futurist. But my background is in being a showgirl and owning nightclubs in New York and in Shanghai, where my husband Norman and I opened up the first burlesque and cabaret nightclub in China, in Shanghai, and lived to tell the tale.
Norman, why don't you explain a little bit more about you and your background and what
Okay, hi, I'm Norman Gosling. I'm lucky enough to be Miss Amelia's husband. I'm a little older, and I could guess you could summarise my career under the general umbrella of design. I went to design school in the early 60s, but didn't graduate or anything, because I designed my way by hitching to India and enjoying the benefits of being a hippie. But in general, it's been design that's linked my career. So I've designed nightclubs, hotels, stores, album covers, art, big A, small a. So, anything rather than take a regular job.
Okay, so we've got two very different thinkers, and one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation was because we were having a conversation, Amelia, about your original kind of burlesque piece that you did in VR. Yep. Now, first of all, how long ago was it?
Yeah, so it was 2015.
Okay.
And we produced the show called House of Love. And we went out to Brooklyn, got the old troupe back together, the burlesque troupe from New York, and we produced an exquisite little gem of a show in a little jewel box for a private, very hip crowd. And that was October 2015.
Okay. So I'm curious from your perspective what the challenges and the differences were when you were putting together that experience in VR. And I remember one of the things that you said the other night was how different everything is now, even if we look at just between 2015 and 2017.
Absolutely.
The difference in the technology and how you would execute that. Well, what were the kind of key challenges for you?
Yeah, there's always challenges being the first to do anything. I think it's a really exciting position to be in. But then, you know, especially with VR, the tech is moving at such a pace. So we were doing GoPros all linked together, and I think we had 2 cameras, and they were stationary. And there were things that we ran into, for instance, like lighting, you know, for stage lighting to get that kind of theatrical, beautiful, glamorous look that we love to get. It was a bit of a challenge for the people filming to do it in that kind of a light and stuff. But for me, why I was really super interested in doing it is because when you do theater, it's very difficult to capture that on film and get across how it feels to be in the audience, how it feels to be on stage, and that whole experience of the atmosphere. And in virtual reality, it seems that this would be a perfect kind of platform and media to capture the energy in the room, because you can actually look around and see the people interacting and couples making out in the corner and girls changing behind the curtain and have more of a real experience in that environment. But here I am 2 years later, and the footage to me looks outdated because it's developed so fast. And now, you know, things are moving into a seamless area, and sound quality's better, pixel quality's better, all these kind of things. So I'd love to do it again with where it's at the moment.
What attracted me to do the VR thing a couple of years ago was I can see that there's the possibility there to record our kind of events without being so intrusive doing it that you alter the nature of the event itself. This is always, I opened the very first burlesque club, modern burlesque clubs in New York in the mid-90s, Dutch Wiseman's, and then the Slipper Room and so on. And we'd get together a fabulous show that's completely knocking the audience out. But it is an experience, and as soon as you try and capture it on films, either it looks grotesque because it's not filmic, it's a live experience and it's exaggerated, or quite honestly, a 4-camera shoot, which is what you need to capture something like that in the traditional way, is very intrusive. and it stops being a live gig and starts being a recording session with people in it. Because of the size of VR cameras, and because they're essentially, what you're doing is you're reproducing POV, point of view from someone, rather than a film which has close-ups, pans, sweeps. It's a different sensibility. And I think that people who are directing or making pieces in VR, I don't necessarily think that great experience in traditional filmmaking is a lot of use because it's such a different discipline. To me, I think, and this suits me because it suits my skill set, actually Shakespearean theatre, like the Globe.
Theatre in the round.
Theatre in the round, or wrestling, or politics, or anything. These are better models. People are there. Now, I ran for a while a small burlesque bar where it was essentially a small cafe in LA that had a U-shaped counter in it. You could only get 100 people in there, and every 17 and a half minutes a girl would get sent out onto the runway, and there's a little jazz band in the sort of the U of the thing. And it full of stars. It was too small for anything. Running that and keeping that visually attractive and running it is, I found, to be very, very similar to trying to do a VR experience. There's so many balls in the air, and of course you don't have these traditional cuts. You can't stop. It's good. Yeah. So this should be really, it should facilitate the kind of intimate performances that we like, which are very, very hard to reproduce. If you say to me, where have you seen the kind of theatrical experiences that we do on film? I mean, you will quote films like Cabaret or stuff like that, but these are, if you'd have been there at the shooting of it, it would not have looked as it did on screen. These are essentially filmic events. Yeah. So VR should make huge inroads into capturing performance that has never been captured before.
Oh, well, I think also as the cameras get smaller, I think that's going to really open up a lot of really cool opportunities in VR as well. And then where I'm especially interested in is taking it more into sensory reality with adding haptics to it, also adding directional auditory senses as well.
So I'm kind of curious, from your design sentiment and the design history that you have, and you talked about that kind of U-shaped stage that you had. And that kind of whole thing. What's your sentiment in terms of kind of the actual physical spaces when you're trying to create these types of experiences? Did you have a particular preference when you were trying to put together this show as to what type of physical presence you wanted?
Yeah, no, I have very, very clear. You've got to remember, I'm a lot older than you kids, so... I misspent my childhood in the 50s and 60s watching old films on TV, ones you don't see. And I, from Busby Berkeley through all kinds of films. Barbary Coast with Edward G. Robinson. It's about a giant nightclub in San Francisco in the 1890s called the Barbary Coast. Give me a steak and a piece of that pie. And, it's showgirls and fights. I saw that as a kid and I thought, that's the kind of joint I want to own. And most kids wanted to be firemen or Red Indians or something. I wanted to be a saloon keeper or a brothel owner. So, one moves toward what? And for me, there's not much new there's new techniques and there's new tools, but in terms of what goes down and the style of what goes down, there's nothing new in theatre or anything. There's nothing that wasn't covered by the Greeks. There's just, And I think that the Victorians really, really nailed how to do small variety performances. The whole vaudeville burlesque circuits. They got it right. So to some extent, design-wise, you tend to copy those spaces. And I actually, for about 10 years, I called what I was doing in New York Victorianation, which is, and I got a lot of jobs taking the black box theatres, just a naked black box with a rake of seating, which had been so popular for performances in the 70s, 80s, 90s. As this new taste for variety and burlesque came up, so did the taste for the original spaces it was created, or rather an understanding of why the spaces were designed, decorated, tricked out the way they were. Victorian vaudeville theatres, number one, they absolutely rammed loads of people into a really tight space. Often the spaces were quite vertical, so the rake of the seating was really extreme, so much so that health and safety won't allow that kind of thing. But I will say that it engendered a communal experience which you don't get with everyone comfortably separated from everyone else. It plays to a crowd mentality. So I try to reproduce this in the clubs. Plus, that nightclub I saw in that film when I was a kid, with the cowboys fighting and the girls, and the hookers with the hearts of gold, all this kind of stuff. That was my template, and I've managed to pull it off a few times.
Okay. So I'm curious, beyond the VR, let's move beyond technology, because I know that you both get up to very, very interesting things. But tell us about your book.
Oh, sure. So my book is called Diary of a Shanghai Showgirl, and it's available on Amazon and Kindle, and it's done pretty good. So it is about how we moved to China in 2007 with the ambition to open up the first burlesque and cabaret nightclub. So at the time, we could kind of see the economic crisis coming. We had been at the top of our game in New York. We had an illegal speakeasy called the Blushing Diamond Review, and it was amazing. And then we kind of found out that we were going to get raided and shut down probably. So we're looking at what to do next. And China looked like the future. Shanghai looked like the city of the future. And I think I kind of dared Norman and said, let's put your money where your mouth is. Let's go. Let's do it. And so we did, and it was such an adventure. It took 2 years to get everything in place, all the funding. We secured a 1932 Buddhist temple in the Hongkou district on Rapulu, and it was designed by a Japanese designer in a Hindu-style architecture in the Jewish section of Shanghai in the 1930s, and it was the most amazing, beautiful building you've ever seen. It was just meant to be cabaret and burlesque nightclub.
Yeah, I've built about 200-300 clubs in my life, and the story of my life is going around cities, poking around in the areas that are still cheap and haven't been gentrified, where you could do these kind of things. And when I turned the corner and saw this building that we ended up building, I mean, it was just love at first sight. The entire front of the building was a semicircular conch shell made of concrete. Really hard to describe, but like a giant seashell. Just an amazing building.
And we opened in 2009, and it was the most beautiful nightclub. I mean, it was Norman's masterpiece, absolutely. 3 stories. We had a VIP bar in the heavens. We had a second floor of private rooms. The stage was gorgeous. I had a cast of 10, so we had 6 showgirls and 4 guys. We did a different show every night. We did 4 shows a week, 2 nights a week in Chinese, 2 nights in English. I called it New Vaudeville because it was a real mixture of burlesque and cabaret and vaudeville.
My name for it was pre-television entertainment. That's what I mentioned. You hear this word burlesque. I'd opened the first burlesque clubs in the mid-90s. And, I got to tell you, in the first couple of years we opened, and it was very much for bohemians and cultured people and stuff. It was, it was not a popular form. It was new. And, there was a wonderful knowing, ironic shock value to burlesque when it first came out. But I was kind of over it real quick. So by 2002, I'd stopped using the name burlesque, but it's the one that caught on. So, we get lumped under burlesque, and girls do take their clothes off, but it's not the center of the show. What's at the center of the show is stagecraft and talent and knowing choice of material. Amelia is I've done a lot of theatrical direction, but Amelia is a wonderful theatrical director. She's formally trained, and she learnt it all and then threw that stuff aside and did it her own way. She's the best. So we were fortunate enough, we put this 10-person ensemble group together, and because of delays, China, of opening, we had a year of rehearsal before we opened. So when she says we were doing different shows every night, we were doing different shows every night. After the whole thing was over and we were counting what we'd done, we had over 100 costumed, distinct acts that we would shuffle recostume, changed some words so that every night there was a new show. This is an amazing thing for a performance troupe to do that. You know, I've been skirting around theatre all my life, and this doesn't happen. So this was a real dream for us. And then, you know, despite the fact that this is a cautionary tale, because we got kicked out of China in the end because we were so successful. And we did this in this period when, it's odd, we did it in a period when you could still do a thing because you couldn't go and do it now. They wouldn't let you do it. But there was still a period when the Chinese authorities were very much trying to make Shanghai the cultural centre of the East, which it kind of is, which it had been in the 20s and 30s. And we essentially sold them the idea that we were going to do a Broadway show in a theme restaurant because they wouldn't really understand what we were doing. And we were immensely popular. We of course we scored all of the expats living there, but we were on the tourist map. We got interviewed by Piers Morgan, not my favourite human being, but his show did get us seen by 20 billion people or something. So we were really on the map, and we started to make real money because we were selling out every night. And you know, if you go to China and you're making washers or curtain hooks or hats or something, that's the place to go. They do stuff cheaply. You sell it, everyone's happy. But if you're going to go there and live there and stick your head up above the parapet and do stuff they don't understand, and especially if you do it and make money, you're putting yourself on the firing line. And that's what happened to us. They wanted our club, and at first, gradually, but then more forcefully, I call it the death of a thousand cuts. They come for you. And it's not somebody comes and says, "Hi, we're the government. We want your club." They send the gangs, the mobs, local officials, local Communist Party officials. Everyone's got their hand there. Everyone, you know, it'll be a Tuesday afternoon, and somebody marches through the door and tells you that you need $2,000 so you can have a license to make orange juice or something. You know, it's just crazy stuff they make up. And as a New Yorker,
but for 20 grand, they'll make it disappear, right?
That's right, yeah. In fact, you know, we got audited towards the end of our thing there by the Chinese government as part of their harassment thing, just to give them the club. And they said, "Look, we've been looking through the books and we noticed, because every penny you take into the country," and I brought about $1.5 million or something into the country to make this all work. "We've been looking through the books and we noticed that there's 350,000 here not accounted for." "Ah, yes, well, that's the bribes I paid you guys. I actually paid you to open this place up." "Ah, there is no bribery in China. But for $500,000, we can make this disappear." So that's the story. That's the story of Business China. I think if you're a huge company, if you're Exxon or thing, I think you pay these bribes. I don't think they get away with it. You know, you pay it. And it used to be the wisdom in China. If you were in big companies, you were untouchable. Not so anymore. It's, I think we were also there during a period, as I said, when it was possible to do this, when the country was attractive enough and had enough infrastructure of our kind for us to do what we want. But they hadn't quite got together their Great Wall of China against new ideas and things that they don't control. So we were there during this 5-6 year wonderful period. It's odd. A lot of the creative people we knew during that period, and we all thought that we were creating a new New York there, a new cultural centre. And we were in some sense, but almost all the creative people we know have left. The marketers are still there, but creative people have moved on because, you know, what makes great creative centres? I say the first thing that makes a great, what made New York so fabulous, say in the 80s, it's how much does the real estate cost? Can you afford for start? Because successful artists, they don't, you know, who gives, you know, they're their own thing. No, creative communities come to places where there's real estate they can afford. The East End of London 15 years ago. Not anymore, right? And if you moved to New York today, you wouldn't be living where I lived in Chelsea. You'd be living in the outer reaches of Long Island, you know, if you're a starving artist. So when we moved to Shanghai, real estate was very cheap. Within 4 years, just where we live, we had a beautiful house in the French concession. Rents had quadrupled at least. In fact, in my book that I'm writing at the moment, my last chapter I'm writing about is about how gentrification has followed me around the world as I go off and do these nifty projects with cheap real estate and hungry artists. We succeed. cool people move into the area that you carved out of naked sewage, and the next thing you know, they want you to move because you're making too much noise for them and their 2-year-old children. It's a terrible story. Happens all over. All right, the big question I know you want to ask is, where next? Where do you go to do something creative? The answer is, I'll let you know when I find out. At the moment, the best I'm coming up with is Uruguay. So I think that says a lot about the state of the world, doesn't it?
Well, actually, you mentioned there about creative people and the kind of creative community that you've worked with and you've known. And I recall that Amelia mentioned some music artists that you might have worked with in the past. And that
you want me to name drop?
No, it's not that I want you to name drop.
I don't mind. Yeah, I'm common as muck.
I'm curious about your kind of experiences within the music industry, because a lot of people would say that there's some challenges within the music industry at the moment in terms of the distribution and the way that people are making money, revenue models in the music industry.
I, as long as most other people, do not understand, because as an old school guy, I understand record sales, I understand gigs, I understand promotional. You're famous, you get paid to be so. But I don't understand how the modern download economy works in terms of, I understand how it works for Ed Sheeran, but I don't understand how it works for bands who are doing gigs in pubs that aren't there anymore. I don't understand. With me, the music business was such, I came of age in the mid-'60s when swinging London was only 500 people. So you actually got to meet all these people. I used to go to parties in 1965 where you'd see the Beatles and people like that. You would, and the Stones and stuff. And stuff. But and then of course, after, in the late 60s, I was doing album covers or working for a company that did the great album covers. So there was lots of contact there. And then in the late 60s or 70s, I was in a rock band, called Magic Muscle. We were Hawkwind's backup band, and we toured all over the place. And you just get to know the game. When I moved to New York, I started a studio with some friends of mine, and also I'd managed a bunch of acts too. I managed a bunch of punk acts here. I brought skateboarding to England and made a fortune. And I was the guy that kind of made the connection between skateboard and punk. And I was managing a bunch of punk bands at the time, including Social Security and the Cortinas and a bunch of other bands. And in my skateboard shop in Clifton, Bristol, which is where the centre of my cartel, my skateboard empire was, who worked in my store there were Massive Attack and Tricky and all those guys as 14-year-old kids. Tricky's one of the reasons Tricky's got his name, because he used to thieve so much from our stores. Great guy, great kid. So, always involved in music. But then when I moved to New York,
to join Devo.
I'd run away to America. You've got to remember, in the late 70s in England, you had Thatcher coming and all the miserable shit going on, terrible. So I ran away to America with a very expensive girlfriend to join Devo, who I ended up working for them and doing their backdrops for them and working with their filmmaker, who's a genius. But I was very lucky. I took my design skills and I fell in with a bad crowd. You've got to remember that the New York I thought I was moving to was the New York of jazz and Woody Allen and stuff, but in fact it was filthy, it was broke, it was dangerous, and I loved it. It was just, you could do things. There was a facility to do things in New York. America had written New York off. Remember, in 1976, Gerald Ford had sent to New York, which was bankrupt, basically, go F yourself, get lost. And that was brilliant because New York was not part of America. It was its own sovereign space, We were so annoyed when 2001 happened, not just because they came and bombed us, because the rest of America came in going, it was like, leave us alone. We're New Yorkers. We've been dealing with this shit forever, But so I ended up getting involved in the early 80s with building some of the great nightclubs in New York, and I became a designer. And I've got to say, it's a wonderful discipline because unlike designing houses or hotels or something like that, the point of nightclub architecture is to excite, to disorient, to blow your mind. And we built, so you know the names of a lot of the nightclubs that I worked around,
But you also designed the stage sets for people like Prince and Paul McCartney and Bob Dylan.
No, I did. No,
You're just name dropping it.
I got some. Right here, let me tell you here a quick story here. Right, I got very lucky when I moved to New York. I scored the penthouse of the Chelsea Hotel in New York, which for anyone who's listening who doesn't know what the Chelsea Hotel is, well, get a life, go read some books. But no, it's a bohemian hotel that was a bubble of bohemia right up until 2007 that lived by its own rules and was peopled with artists, layabouts, geniuses, deadbeats, millionaires. Just an amazing place, run as a very singular space by the guy that owned it. And I managed to score the penthouse of it, which was the oldest rooftop garden in Manhattan. Just a fabulous space. I lived in the cottage. So given that and working with the clubs that I was working in, I always attracted I had 1,000 square meters of rooftop garden in the center of Manhattan with 40-foot trees, with a cherry tree that had been planted by Sarah Bernhardt in the 1880s, who'd lived in my apartment. My apartment in the Chelsea had been where Marilyn Monroe spent part of her honeymoon with Arthur Miller, a very famous spot. The Grateful Dead lived there, all kinds of stuff. So I was in a real position to enjoy the fruits of being a British bohemian in Manhattan, and I got lots of work. But here's the story. I'm in my apartment on the roof of the Chelsea one day, and the phone goes, and I pick it up, and there's a big black voice on the end says, "Hello, is Norman Gosden here?" "Yeah, speaking. Hello, someone to speak to you." And a little voice comes down and goes, "Hi, is this Norman? Are you the guy that did all that stuff for Devo's background?" And I was like, yeah. He goes, "Hi, this is Prince." I was like, "Oh, hey, yeah." He goes, blah, blah, blah. "Could you do this? Would you be interested in doing this for me?" And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Are you available next weekend?" So I put my hand over. I go, "Yeah, let me just check." I put my hand over the phone. "There's Prince on the phone." He went, going crazy. He flew me out the next weekend, and I was to Minneapolis, which I'd never been to before. I thought Minneapolis was going to be like Birmingham, wasn't it? A beautiful city. And nothing against Birmingham. And I'm picked up at the airport by a 6'1" blonde in purple livery, in a purple limo, and taken out. Just amazing. And he treated me. You hear so many stories about Prince. He was fantastic with me. Did a bunch of work with him. Never did a whole project for him that involved him and Miles Davis, that he paid me for, was very grateful for, and immediately shelved along with millions of other projects. When he died, I got an email at one stage from, saying, checking the provenance of things. But, so I worked. Then about a year later, I get a phone call from him saying, "Are you still doing that club Nels?" Nels was the first of the clubs that weren't big dance clubs. It was a smaller club, and it was more like a lounge. It was the first of the hot lounges. We put that together in '86, I think. And he said, "You still doing that?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "I'd like to come down." So he comes down that Friday. He says, "I'm coming down on Friday." He arrives at 2:00 in the morning. We close the doors. And until 6 in the morning, he danced on tables, spun records, danced with girls. Just amazing. Then a week after that, I get a phone call going, I think, "Hey, I'm Prince's best friend," saying, "Listen, I'm doing a little thing today. I thought you might be interested, but it's not really for you people." By you people, he means white people. He goes, "But I've got a little gig that I thought you might like." What that little gig was he was doing a charity gig for the children of Harlem at the Apollo with him and James Brown. And I went to see it, and you understand the audience was made up of young kids who probably didn't know who James Brown was and stuff. And there was just 2 rows of us white industry folks sort of sat off to one side looking like, just amazing. And not only because James Brown was there, but James was getting old by then, but Prince was so beautiful. He propped him up and he danced around him, and he did it to make James look good. But what was amazing was to see the reaction of 6,000 young Harlem kids going nuts for the real thing. So that's why I do these kind of things, just for the odd chance I'm going to get invited to do like that, which, a real landmark.
So, in amongst all of this, one of the things I found really interesting that you talked about was the nature of the architecture for nightclubs and what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and the fact that both of you have experience as directors for various different types of shows. And I'm curious, taking it all the way back to the technology, because our lovely listeners are obsessed with technology.
Yep.
I'm curious from your perspective, if you see any kind of progression towards some kind of hybrid theatre / kind of, 360 film type experiences, because a lot of people are talking about those skill sets for 360 film and the hybrid kind of use of the technology within a theatre environment. So it's not just about putting a headset on your head to view the content, but to see that content in an immersive environment itself in terms of a theatrical environment.
Yeah, I think there's opening up new possibilities for that. It is a really fascinating area for me. So one thing about virtual reality to me is it's exclusive of your environment, the people around you, and the actual space that you're in. And that's why I'm really into VR or mixed reality at the moment. But within that virtual environment, to be able to break through geographical barriers and hang out with people, social VR is going to have a huge impact on all of this. So I have friends now who are going on dates in virtual reality to comedy clubs and having these kind of live experiences, which do have a challenge, but there are new ways also that you can enjoy this in the round. So we're starting to see a lot more sort of ways that people can come together inside and outside of virtual reality to enjoy those kind of experiences.
When we first got back from Shanghai here, this is kind of my idea. There's a very large space on Brick Lane, the Truman Brewery, and the main room with the chimney on it, which they use for events, and they make a lot of money out of it. I got in front of the owners there and worked for months to get that space, and showed them who I was and stuff. And they were they were up for it. I wanted to do a new kind of theatre, and for me, because the tech is part of it, I also saw a great challenge in the physical theatre. I was looking to do a flexible, versatile space where you could put 2,000 people in watching a stand-up type gig. But then what do you do on a Wednesday night when you've got a 300-person gig? You're in a barn and it's empty. So I've had quite a lot of experience in building flexible spaces which you upsize, downsize as you need to be, so that they are comfortable, so that they're suitable for the thing. And but by the time I was designing this place, this was 2012, I was also taking into account the new tech. It's, VR. I'm much more interested in AR than VR for the reasons that Amelia laid out. I think it's while I think that in VR, yes, of course, there's a huge future for it. I've got an old school mind. It's difficult for me to think past it. Whereas I can understand MR and AR because you take reality as the start-off point and then you add to it, in layers or whatever. And I get that. And you can still stay in touch with the people you came with. You don't lose your girlfriend, to some damn robot while you're out at night. That's an old trick. So I tried to do this. Unfortunately, I picked the wrong year to do it because my finance was from the States, and when I really added up the bills to do it, and I was not willing to compromise, I'd just come off my Chinese trip where I lost a couple of million quid on that. I wanted to do it properly, and I really wanted to build a new kind of theatre theatre space. Theatre is a bit of a pompous word. Theatre space where you could do anything from rock gigs to car shows, through real theatre, through, be-ins, whatever was there. But I wanted to do it properly. And when I added up the bills, I came to about 7 or 8 million quid to do the conversion. And my money in the States was, let me get this right, 12 million to England at the moment? Nah, not going to do it. I think maybe, I think just before the Brexit result, England was looking really good. And I noticed that lots and lots of New York restaurants were branching out here. You've got Shake Shack, Balthazar, all these people that were never going to come here. I know all the guys that run those places. They ain't going to come to London. They came, so maybe. But of course, Brexit's put the stop on that. I don't see anyone do it. But if I was going to do such a thing these days, I'd looking to be doing it in Berlin or maybe LA or something, somewhere where they're looking to Lisbon, yeah. Also, I think you're starting to see as the first cities become so expensive and such, enclaves of money, you're starting to really see the second cities showing themselves. I'm biased because I'm from there, but like Bristol looks gorgeous in England now, and and in America, Portland and San Francisco before tech. and it became too expensive. So, I think there's some spunky second cities out there. Lisbon's looking really good.
Yeah, so if we were going to do the virtual reality thing again with our shows, I would love to be able to have somebody see what it's like to be a dancer on stage, looking out at the audience, having the backstage experience, seeing the eyes through them long eyelashes and glitter and pearls and stuff. Yeah. And then be able to try, other people's experiences. So what it's like to be the stage manager offside, who has to pick up all the girls' clothes as they take it off, or the bartender at the back. And that was one of the things that we tried to do. We had a small space. It was called the Love Shack in Brooklyn.
This is when we did the VR show.
And we loved it because it had different layers. So above the stage, there was a little window that had some curtains, but we had the girls change up there during the scenes and stuff. So if somebody was watching in VR, they could look up and there would be something happening over there. Or there would be, a couple making out on the corner, or, you could look all the way around and have different experiences. But nowadays, I'd want to be able to walk through it. I'd want to be the dancer coming on stage. I'd want to be able to switch between different experiences, different points of view, and see what that was like.
Notice, though, we're only talking here really about VR type tech. There's also all the other techs which are advancing incredibly. I was one of the first guys in the 90s to use LED lighting on stage. For some things, it's useless. Traditional lights for spotlights, throw spots and stuff, you can't beat them. But for in-close lighting and for washes and stuff like that, LED is amazing, So I was the first guy in the States, in Clubland in New York, to really use LEDs. Now, here in England, I've got this project on the books that I'm, maybe we'll have, maybe not, and it's to do a really, really high-end, I won't use the word burlesque, but variety show using people from all over the world, because we really do have connects all over the world, kind of like the best of. And our focus here was to try and catch that magic of live entertainment, which is so hard to catch because of focus. And our new way of doing it was to build a nightclub situation inside a studio, and then to bring in an invited audience, say 150 people who look good because, you've got an end product and stuff. But once they're in there, we were not going to prick the balloon, the performance balloon. We were going to put in 50 GoPros all over the place. And then we were going to have flying cameras on booms and stuff like that over the whole thing. But you wouldn't be able to see any of it. So that you got both a very attractive visual setting without the tech thingy, and also people lose awareness that they're on camera, and that's when you catch the good stuff. One of those factors, you turn the camera on me, I get all pro and stuff, blah 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 blah. You catch me without a camera, trousers off half the time.
Footage that was ever captured of our show was New York Magazine, and actually helped contribute to us getting our speakeasy shut down probably, but they just had a little phone camera, handheld or something, but it was so unobtrusive that they really captured the moment. Nobody was self-conscious about being on film.
But it's not in focus, and it's not, but you know what? People at these gigs aren't in focus. So many times when I try to capture the kind of live entertainment, intimate, you have tech people go, you've got to have more light. You go, no, if it's any brighter in here, it's like doing it in a filthy laundrette. It's the job here is for you to capture what we're doing, not for us to alter what we're doing so you can capture it. And I don't want to hear about too little light. No. Do not listen to technicians. Like I say, handheld and stuff, it's not broadcast quality. But then broadcast quality is an odd thing. It's almost a homogenization of view. Everything's got to be in focus. No. You're not in focus in a nightclub. Half your night's blurred,
So I've said before, one thing I'm really interested in is haptics and how you can use that. So I went to a technology debut last week in Bristol for this company called Substrike. And what they're looking at is how they can convey infrasonic frequencies. So when you go to a rock concert or when you go to the theater or something, you don't just see it, you don't just hear it, you actually feel it. And how we can start to incorporate those into the virtual and mixed reality experiences. So from a home experience, you actually have a physical sensation like you are there in the room. You can feel the...
And do you remember I said earlier on, there's nothing new? I remember going in 1963 to this independent cinema on the outskirts of Bristol that showed And I saw William Castle's The Tingler, which was a horror film. And during the high points of the film, they send a mild electric shock through the seats.
Goodness.
Absolutely. This is.
I'm not up for that.
Yeah, this is prehistoric haptics. It was funny too, because
Yeah.
you were waiting for it. And it was a very small little shot. And then there was another film called The Mask, which came out in, not the one with Jim Carrey. It came out in the mid-60s, where you had to put on the 3D glasses. And it was in this bogus kind of Aztec setup. But the brilliant thing was when the 3D bits were gone, the priest who was running this Aztec cult will come out and go, put on the mask, put on the mask. And everyone in the cinema will put their thing on. And then you get all these, the low-grade 3D effects. How do you feel about 3D? You enjoy it?
Well, I'm not a huge fan of 3D because oftentimes I feel like a lot of the movies that are being made at the moment that are being, screened in 3D, it's very much an after-the-fact type of thing. It wasn't intended for that. So it's all well and good when James Cameron does it with Avatar, and it's very much, part of the development process. But when you've kind of already got the film in the can, and then you're just kind of going back to it and saying, what can we make into something that's a 3D object? Yeah. It just feels very...
It feels like it's ticket sales based on. That said, I was lucky enough to work on the very first 3D live broadcast, which was done on Campus Entertainment Network, an American. This was before. This was back in the 80s. This was that did concerts and then sent them out to cinemas on campuses all over. And I did Devos, and I did months and months applying, and they showed up, and it was the background of the stage was black. And I designed it on these yellow. They turned up all wearing black, and they were not going to change. Devo did not change what they were going to do. It was really difficult, but I did do it.
I just want to go back briefly to what you was just talking there about the kind of the sonics piece that you was just talking about, and actually I find this really interesting because very recently I went to see the new film Dunkirk at a screening for that movie, and I will be honest, and those who know me at Warner Brothers know this happened, I did end up having to leave the screening and be violently ill in the bathroom.
Because of the vibration?
Because the way that the sound design has been put together, when the aeroplanes are coming in to do they're sweeping across firing at people and what have you, the depth of the sound vibrates through you. It really draws you in. It adds an extra layer of immersivity because your heartbeat is literally going at pace with this actual physical vibration because they're using that base of the sound, and that plus the water motion because you're constant. Everybody's drowning basically in the movie. And they don't have steady camera angles when they're on the water, so the angle of the camera is going against the flow of the water as well. So that plus this kind of physical...
You got a bit haptic out.
Yes, it was Chris Nolan apparently said he wanted it to be very immersive. It was perhaps too immersive, but a lot of that contribution was because of the sonic impact of that very deep sound.
Did you like what you managed to say?
It was very good.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
Good.
So, but what if you could, each individual watching that could turn their frequencies up and down? So some people might want to have that major full-on rock concert effect, whereas you might just want to have a very subtle sort of experience. So I think we're moving into an era where everything's becoming more personalized and customized, and I think that that's going to be something that goes right along with it as far as sort of how VR adjusts to different people's eyes, different people's vision, all these different things. I think
I'm very much looking forward to the adjustment when I don't have to faff about with my glasses.
Yeah, exactly.
But as always, we like to give our listeners a way to find out a little bit more about you and what you're up to. We ask you to do that by sharing your social media handle of choice. What would that be?
Well, mine is at Amelia Coleman on Twitter, and that's my website too, Amelia Coleman.
And mine is at Amelia Coleman on Twitter, and the same because I'm too old for Bookface or any of these things. I am. I took it very seriously in the 80s when they said we were entering the information age and it was powerful. I didn't give no information away for free. All you guys who tell them all on Facebook, bad move.
And the book's also diaryofaShanghaiShowgirl.com.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to subscribe and review and follow us on Twitter at Digital Jam Ltd. Thinking of starting your own podcast? Why not speak to the GL Pro UK team? They handle all of our podcasting service needs.
Tell them that Digital Jam Session sent you and you'll get 10% off your first order. Find out more at www.glpro.co.uk.
digitaljamsessions.com